Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the 1,775 poems of the Johnson edition of Emily Dickinson's poetry. We now turn to poem number 3, Sic transit gloria mundi, translated as often, so passes the glory of the world. I like to say it as, you exist, but not for long. And we'll get into the academic nature of this poem. This poem is very different from any other poem of the 1775 poems that we'll be studying together. It's 68 lines, which immediately makes it the longest of Emily's poetry that we'll have here. It's another Valentine Day poem of 1852. In some ways, many readers have seen this as more just early juvenilia, but I see it as far more profound. I think there's a lot happening in this poem. I'm hopeful that I can share that with you now. One of the things we're going to see is Emily's wit, her capacity to ridicule through the riddle, and we're going to, kind of see her having all kinds of fun. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. You've already been exposed to our introductory lecture, and then we just finished with poem number 2, There's Another Sky. Now, let's play around with a little bit of background information before we get to this poem. The Latin here of Sic transit gloria mundi is from Thomas Kempis's Imitation of Christ, 1418, a text that we believe Emily spent quite a bit of time with. And again, it's often translated as how quickly the glory of the world fades away. Now, this was written for William Howland, although it's not a love poem per se for a Valentine's Day. He's a Springfield lawyer, and he was a former tutor at Amherst. Now, there is an unnamed friend who will, in some ways, betray Emily at age 22. And this poem gets published in the Springfield Republican the 20th of February, 1852, much to Emily's chagrin. She did publish 10 times in her life, but according to all the scholars, never actually wanted the publishing to happen, and this will be one of those poems as well. Now, I enjoy the experience of reading this poem in its total and then coming back, but we just don't have the time. So let's work one at a time. Notice right away the quotation marks. Do you see it? So we're obviously making references to some of the academic types of references early on. Sic transit gloria mundi, I've already said to you, so passes the glory of the world. How doth the busy bee? Bees are going to be very popular in Emily Dickinson. We'll see it over and over again. By the way, this actually the line is, how does the little busy bee, from Isaac Watts of 1715, and it goes like this: how doth the little busy bee improve each shining hour? Song 20 of Isaac Watts's poem, and then we're going to get a line again in Latin, dum vivamus, vivamus, let us live while we live. This idea of seize the day, carpe diem, is of course playing there. And then she finishes this little 4-line introductory with, I stay mine enemy, which is a very interesting Homeric Iliadic kind of line. We give in full lectures at learnstrong.net on every book of the Iliad. You can run that to ground to here. I think that what Emily is doing early on in this poem is trying to position herself within the epic tradition, as we were saying in earlier poems as well. And now to finish with Veni Vici Vici, Veni Vidi Vici, of course Caesar's classic line from 47 BC, I came, I saw, I conquered. O caput capapai, that is to say, from head to foot. And there seems to almost be some referencing here to Virgil's Aeneid. And again, you can run to ground our lectures on the Aeneid. And there's to follow then with the Stoic, and O memento mori, of course, remember that you're mortal, and the Stoics from Marcus Aurelius to Epictetus on, playing that game, a number of great thinkers. When I am far from thee. So we're already now, just 8 lines in, and we're already looking at the game that she is playing with all of these quotes. Clearly there's a tone of voice here that will now be exploited with the word hurrah. Hurrah for Peter Parley, the pen name of Samuel Griswold, an American author. Hurrah for Daniel Boone, of course, died at the Alamo. 3 cheers, sir, for the gentleman who first observed the moon. This is probably a reference to Galileo. And again, it kind of puts her in that same tradition with Milton, who will make references to Galileo, as we said in Paradise Lost in our lectures at learnstrong.net there. Peter, now to speak to Samuel Griswold, Peter put up the sunshine. He wrote a children's geography book, by the way. Patty arranged the stars. This is Adeline Patty, an opera singer. Tell Luna tea is waiting, and call your brother Mars. Again, she's kind of playing with her Roman and her Latin studies with Luna and Mars. Put down the apple, Adam. I've told you guys already. And in our study of Talks with Walt, I made this same observation, that Milton stands behind much of the poetry of Whitman, and I believe much of the poetry of Emily Dickinson as well. And the reason of our Big Five is because I think Emily Dickinson, like Walt Whitman, understood that Milton was totally into all of those Big Five. Obviously, epistemology, ontology, psychology, sociology, but the last one, the question of theodicy, I think, and I think this poem is actually a theodicy of a kind. I'll try and make that argument here in a little bit. Put down the apple, Adam, and come away with me. Think about Emily as Eve here. It's fascinating. So shalt thou have a pippin, an apple, right, from off my father's tree. In other words, it almost seems as if she's trying to stop some notion of the fall, as it's defined in Milton's Paradise Lost. I climbed the, notice it's in quotation marks, the hill of science. You can think about Amherst, the college, being, of course, on a hill. I view the landscape, or think about this idea of what Emerson will produce in his all-seeing eye. Such transcendental, to speak of Emerson, such transcendental prospect I ne'er beheld before, exclamation point. By the way, this is the only time in all of Emily's poetry that she'll use this term transcendental. As we said in our lectures on Emerson at learnstrong.net, Emerson himself did not like this term transcendental. He liked more the term idealists, right? Unto the legislature my country bids me go. Now, is this poking maybe fun at her own father, who was involved in the legislature and in politics? I'll take my India rubbers in case the wind should blow. Notice the political satire here, almost sounding like Swift, Jonathan Swift, right? That is to say, all of the politics and the intrigue that always seems to be involved. That is to say, the bad weather and the like, the India rubbers and the wind and the rain and all of that. And then Emily as teacher, as pedagogue. During my education, it was announced to me that gravitation, stumbling, fell from an apple tree. Her reference, obviously, to Newton here. But I think there's something else going on, and I think she's already playing the game that she will play again and again in her poetry, where notice it's as if she's musing on the potentiality that so much of maybe what is going on in her education is suspect. The earth upon its axis was once supposed to turn. I think that key word is supposed, by way of a gymnastic in honor of the sun. This to me is one of the first pure Emily Dickinson-like lines thus far that we've studied, and we're going to see so much more of this and the punning that goes on. Think about the idea of turning on axis and the like. And then she'll say it was the brave Columbus, a sailing o'er the tide, who notified the nations of where I would reside. This idea of Columbus and the celebration of Columbus obviously makes us think of Whitman's Prayer of Columbus. We gave a full lecture again at learnstrong.net in our Talks with Walt. I'd like to point out that when we hit poem 555, we're going to play the same game. 'Twas thus allured Columbus when Genoa withdrew before an apparition baptized America. We're going to play a very similar kind of game. By the way, think about how sailing was used in, it will be used in poem 4 as we get there. Now to finish. Mortality is fatal, gentility is fine, rascality heroic, insolvency sublime. This is pure Emily Dickinson here. There is in some ways a kind of almost like turning point of this poem. And notice, of course, the Matthew 19:23-24, the rich man in the eye of the needle game that's being played. Our fathers being weary, here of course we're referencing forefathers, laid down on Bunker Hill. Think about all of the Revolutionary War dead that are being celebrated in the cemetery at Bunker and the like. And though full many a morning, yet they are sleeping still. there is no way to bring back the heroes. And there seems to be almost a suggestion that maybe that is the fact of this poem. There is no ability to kind of bring the heroes back, if they were heroes at all, maybe for Emily. The trumpets, sir, notice the use of the word sir. The trumpets, sir, shall wake them in dreams. I see them rise, each with a solemn musket, a marching to the skies. It's an amazing thing to go back and look at Whitman's Boston Ballad of 1854 and notice that this was in the air, this ability to try and look back, to try and get a sense of it. And of course, Lincoln will play the same game, won't he, in 7 years ago in his Gettysburg Address. A coward will remain, sir, notice again the repetition of the word sir, until the fight is done. But an immortal hero will take his hat and run. This is fascinating to me. Emily's paradoxes, right? Poking fun maybe at the idea of reputation in general. This idea of the immortal hero will take us to poem 1256. Let's just look at it for just a second. I find this another one of those kind of interesting moments early on when so much is happening. At 1256, not any higher stands the grave for heroes than for men, nor any nearer for the child than numb 10. We'll come back to that poem obviously later. Goodbye, sir. Now she finishes. I'm going. My country calleth me. Again, this is almost like pseudo-patriotism, it seems. Allow me, sir, at parting, to wipe my weeping eye. In other words, it's almost as if she wants to almost make fun, Emily, the politician here, of some of these ideas. In token of our friendship, accept this bonny Doon, that is to say, a valentine. This comes from Burns's The Banks of Doon. It's a flower, in other words. Accept this bonny Doon. And this is, again, almost a humorous view of death and mortality. And when the hand that plucked it hath passed beyond the moon, the memory of my ashes will consolation be. This notion that I'm hopeful that you'll at least remember something about me after I'm gone. We'll get to This Is My Letter to the World That Never Wrote to Me, and we'll hear some of those echoes. Notice then, farewell, Tuscarora. Now, this is an Iroquois term, and it actually literally means hemp gatherers from the North Carolina region. I find this a fascinating way to end this poem. Emily's pal, Helen Fisk Hunt Jackson, that we'll have much more to say about, is a Native American activist in her life. And notice the observation is being made here that a dynamic and a great people with the Tuscarora, that is to say the Iroquois, are gone. Then farewell, Tuscarora, and farewell, sir, to thee. Now, what are we going to make of this set of lines at 2a? I think that in some ways this is the first of many of Emily's theodicies in her collection of poems. And this is what makes studying Emily to me so much different from studying, for example, Leaves of Grass. Because Leaves of Grass has this intentional kind of bringing together of all of those titles and all those sections so that we're able to kind of get a sense of the arguments that he's making from the beginning of Leaves of Grass to the very end. We do not have that in our study of the Johnson edition of Emily's collection of poetry. And to that degree, every time we pick up one of these poems, we're going to ask in our Big Five, what is she saying about the fact that there is pain and evil and suffering in the world, like the passage of great peoples who are now no more? And to what degree can she somehow square that question of the pain, the suffering of the world? Often I think she's arguing it's not appreciated by politicians, not appreciated by academics. Notice again, I stay mine enemy. It may be the most important line of this poem. At 2b, I love that she's playing with the heroic and the epic and the Homeric tradition. I love all of that. At 3a, of course, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations come to mind. Whitman's Prayer of Columbus and Boston Ballad we also mentioned. Finally, at 3b, well, what are your thoughts about the pain and the suffering of the world? We often will say it, the new is the new, the N-E-W is the K-N-E-W. And it seems to me that Whitman and Emily together will make that argument that the most important answer to the theodicy question is not why did this happen to me, but rather why did this happen for me? And I think Emily's maybe gesturing at that as well. How about the pain and suffering of the world politically? Is it for you a matter of laugh or cry? How do you deal with that? How do you read this poem? Again, I'm going to say this, guys, over and over again about all these poems of Emily. You get to decide how you want to read these poems. I'm fascinated by the fact that Emily's poetry can spawn so many different levels of interpretation. But it seems to me that the wit maybe at times political ridicule or satire is coming through wholly as well. Okay, guys, let's move on to poem 4, and we'll enjoy, I think, the next one as well. Thank you.